The next step is we're going to add coordinate. The coordinate are location in latitude and longitude, and you can pick those up from Google Map or Yahoo Map or any other mapping service, and then we can take those coordinates and place it on our map and make sure they rotate with our map. For this exercise, I created another file. I call it rotating round world with coordinates, and it's just a continuous of where we stopped in our last lecture. I just renamed it. We'll start off by creating some coordinates. So what I have for us is a data object that includes coordinates and a name. So we have a name, just a random name. I have 1 and 2, and then we have coordinates that I took from Google Maps in North America. And now what we can do is we can take those coordinates and we can plot them on our map. To plot them on our map, what we can do is we can just add another group inside of our SVG of a circle. And again, if we look at a circle, SVG, it needs, hold on. If you look for a circle in the cheat sheet SVG, it needs a CX, CY, and a radius. So we can add a circle and map that. So let's add a group, and inside the group we'll add a circle, and for a circle we can create a map just like we do with the geographies. So just call the data and we'll call the map, and inside we'll take our data and we'll use an inline function to map through those results. What we need to do is when we map through those results, it's going to be we need the data, and we'll use the index. Okay, I'll just call it I and D so it matches. Then we put the circle inside of our mapping, and we need to create a key. This is a common practice with the React. We gotta have our key. Let's call this key a marker, and we'll use the UUID library, and then we need to create a CX. Don't look like I got a little error here. Oops, what happened? Okay, yeah, this needs to be a round bracket, and we need to put it here as well, a rounded bracket. Okay. Now for the, looks like I'm missing one bracket. Okay. Now for the CX, what we can do is we can use the coordinates in our data and pass that, and then we need to make sure that those coordinates are valid. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a method to handle that. So for the C and Y, we need to check our coordinates and make sure they're correct before we can just parse them. And then for the radius of our circle, we can use 5 pixel, and we'll give it a fill color, a hex fill color of E9. I have color for us 1 E63, and then we need to create a stroke for our circle, and for the stroke we can use a white stroke. And the last thing I want to do is we need to create on-click event. But let's do this later. Let's first create our method to handle to ensure that, that the data coordinates is correct. So to do that, I'm going to create a method. Let's create it under above our return, and I'm going to call that function return projection value when valid. So this will check if our point is valid, and only if our point is valid, then it's gonna return the value. And we're gonna take a point, and a point is gonna be made out of those coordinates that are gonna be of type number, and we'll take the index of type number. And now what we can do is we can create our return value. So we're going to return the coordinates if they're valid. So it's going to be of type number, just like the point, or it's going to be of a null. Depends on what the projection is returning. So we can use our projection to get for our markers. So we already have the projection method that we created. So if you remember, we have the projection right here, and if we pass our point to the projection, it's going to return, you know, the pixel location for those coordinates, just like when we're doing what we used to do with scale. So this is, you know, very similar to how scale works. The projection will give us those points, and then we can draw that on the screen, right? Now we need to check our value, because the projection can bring a null value, so we need to make sure that it's not a null value. So to do that, we can just check if the return value question mark, meaning if it's not null, then we need to check the length, and then if we have that, then we can return our value. And if we don't have that, then we need to return a 0, because we need to return something, otherwise it's just going to break. So if it's not a null and it's set, it gives us a pixel location for our projection based on our coordinates, we can return the those values based on the index, because we're building it for both. We're building it for latitude, and we're building it for latitude and latitude. So when we call this method, we can pass the index, and 1 would be for 0 would be for latitude, 1 would be for longitude. This way we can reuse this method for both of them. So we'll return this return value. When we use the projection, it brings both of those coordinates, so we need to use the one based on the index. I'll show you in a second. And if it doesn't return, if it's a null, we're just going to return 0, because we cannot have it fail. Now when we use this function, take a look. If we go back to our circle, now we can pass our coordinates and use it for both, for the cx and cy. So for the cx, what we need to do is we need to just pass the coordinates, and then this is the longitude, so we'll use 0, and for the latitude, the cy, I'll use a 1. This way we're telling it which index of the array to return, and that way I can use it for the longitude and latitude. Okay, so look again what I'm doing. I'm passing the point and the index. Now if the return value is going to be equal our projection, we're passing the longitude and latitude, and that translates the projection to a pixel. And then we want to, it gives us 2 pixels, right? The x and the y. And we take that pixel And to use it in CX or CY, it takes only one value, right? CX is one value, CY is other value. So we'll return the index based if it's a CX or CY. And if it's return null, we're just returning 0. So that will draw our markers on the pixel location that we expect. Next, just rotate the map. So the initial rotation, let's put it as 50, so it's going to be aligned to North America. So we got the two markers coordinates on our map showing. Then we need to do a couple more things. What we want to do is we want to, if, for example, if we click our those markers, we want to display the results. So we can just add inside of our circle, we can add an event. So we can call it onClick event. And on click event, we can create a handler. Let's call it handle marker click, and we can pass the index. Okay. And for our method, we can go back above the return, and above the return, we can create our function handle marker click, and we're gonna pass the index of type number, and what we can do is just put an alert using the template style. So we can just call marker, and then to get the actual value, we can use JSON stringify and pass the data on the index of I. Let's take a look. Refresh localhost, and now when we're going to click our position, you see we got name 1 and the coordinate, so we can actually do something with those values. We can pass it on or set it as a state. Now the last thing we need to do is once we start moving the map, I'm just adding an ESLint to ignore the alert because my ESLint is set not to allow alerts, so we don't forget it. Now the last thing I want to do is I want to create on mouse enter event. This way, if our map is rotating, we want our map to stop. This way the user can get a chance to click on the marker. Because if we don't do that, that marker can disappear when it's rotating, and it's going to be hard to click it. So we don't want our map to rotate once the user hover over our map. So what I can do is I can use our state. Remember, we said our state is rotate. That if I'll set it to false, is once the mouse enter, it will just stop the rotation, and I can I can put a mouse out to continue the rotation, but I'm just going to stop the rotation. So let's take a look. Okay, now we can start to play and rotate our map. And once I hover over the map, see, once I hover over any of the markers, the rotation stops. And this allows me to click those markers and get the results.